Good morning. It's exactly 8 o'clock a.m. on May 25th, 2021. I get this little news indicator. It's not like an official publication, like the kind of thing that you check in with regularly in the same way. It just gives you indications of news. It's not on any social media network that I know of, right? Because for a very long time, I haven't been allowed to have anything like Twitter or Facebook. As a matter of fact, when I did have Twitter or Facebook accounts, they just got disappeared, right? I even tried a live journal account. It was a little different. I tried to be a little more creative. I had to turn that one off too, right? Because for whatever reason, there's all of these cryptos that have profiles on them of people that are completely inappropriate to be stalking you when you're trying to engage in just regular social media activity, right? Okay. I said at some point in time that my rate would be $450. And then after noticing the volume that was being moved through identity accounts that had been stolen from me, I said it was $4,500 per time unit. My time unit is 15 minutes, right? I contend that I can at least perform $4,500 worth of time, labor, value, and that I do every day. Now, that would be dependent upon what the position would be, right? I have an LLC. I'm a founder. Right now, I'm the only person that works for that LLC, right? I have the capacity to hire other people. In terms of what I'd want to do with my LLC, it would be absolutely appropriate to hire other people or to engage in some compact to engage other people around a sort of mutual benefit. In March of 2014, before I was kidnapped, I created a PowerPoint presentation about how me and the women I was in that domestic violence shelter with could incorporate individually. And then once we incorporated individually, there were a variety of manners we could engage with each other in order to assist each other with getting our resource needs met, creating a network for once we got out of there so that we could still maintain a connection with each other, and also working toward acquiring restitution for what we had been defrauded of while we were in the domestic violence shelter, and to provide us with legal protection. See, you're provided with legal protections when you're incorporated that are different than when you're not. One major example has to do with derivative actions. Specifically in the state of Texas, there are laws concerning incorporation, including and especially, in my case, as an LLC, and about formal processes by which another must engage if they have any intention of using you or your LLC in a derivative action. They have to provide you with official notice at least 90 days before it commences. They cannot just wake up one day and say, I like that. Oh, wait a second. She's got this case pending and she's got a 14-day deadline before this kind of appeal comes due. I'm going to use her in my case. I'm going to use her case and set up a variety of different deals on her case for all these other people I'm interested in helping. And just use her case without telling her and without doing anything to actually verify various things. See, even in derivative action and even in derivative contracts, there are laws. And those laws also include, a, dealing with tax laws, dealing with regulatory compliance, whether you like it or not, dealing with formal notice, dealing with payment. See, there's a difference when you pay someone versus when you don't pay someone. And even if you don't pay someone money, there are intangible considerations, intangible cost, but also intangible investments. And your manner of computing and accounting for those intangible investments can potentially make you credit worthy in one manner or another. And depending on who you're working with, they may deem your intangibles to actually be worth a lot of money were they to be invested in their endeavors. And not only that, then you got to get into concerns and questions about copyright protections and royalties. And perhaps if you agree to it, non competes or exclusive claim, right? I mean, this is a whole catalog of issues that every time they claim us as an asset, they have to deal with, not just by law, but by the logic of the market they claim they want to participate in. They don't tell you this when you go to get assistance at a domestic violence shelter and they put you and your kids in a room and there's a plaque on the outside of the door frame in the room you're supposed to sleep in with your kids that has the name of a petrochem company. They should. And because they didn't, not only they violate the law, but they continue to be implicated in massive crimes. I apologize if you're somebody that thought you were entitled to be availed of the benefits of that kind of acidization and I found out about it. But I'm actually not. Now, if they have something equivalent to an IT 212 in other states in this country, I'm going to do some work in the next 10 days to make sure I find out everything I can about that, right? And I'm going to build that because I think the people that I worked with and the people I knew and the people I would have paid at least at the time or acknowledged at least $24 an hour as a translator of services in terms of preparing the presentation to be multilingual and then working toward and with the people I was with just at that time. So each of us could have incorporated in the manner that was best suited for us, and then we could have worked together the rest of the time we were in that shelter. And then we moved on. I already know someone like that business model. That's why they stole it from me and they cut me out. But they didn't do it genuinely. I also know somebody like the business model I had in Chicago, which was slightly different. But they didn't want me in my own business model. And they didn't do it appropriately. Why? Because if they had, I would have been receiving tax records every year since. If nothing else, the intangible contribution I made in developing the business model. That didn't happen. And see, now you're at this situation where because you didn't go through a process where you valued the contributions of your own supporters, now it's compromised and jeopardized everything you did with the goodwill through bad faith. I don't know who these opportunists are that think that they're entitled to take things that other people give sincerely in their own self-interest to and through manners of addressing the value they see in the people. See, my worst fear is that what happened was somebody really liked those business models. They just didn't want us to have them. The women I was in those shelters with aren't the ones that got to incorporate in that manner and got to take care of themselves and their families and work with me. See, even in the place I was in, I read through the charter of the city. I read through several years worth of budgets for that city. I know what that city considered its value to be, and I know what by law it was allowed to do when it said that it had a certain amount of obligation for the city due, or it had a certain amount of credit for the city to work with. I could have worked with every one of those women in that domestic violence shelter over the course of the next 2 months to become a first-time homeowner, and then to figure out how that we could develop and maintain a network of understanding the value of our actual city so that then we would be able to invest, including in manners that kept our families safe from the fact that they were actually in violation of their charter, which was evident in their actual budget, right? But we could have been people that were homeowners investing in our community, engaging in ordinary political process to reconcile those matters and take care of ourselves and our families. Somebody didn't want women like us to be homeowners and business owners and people that would do things like, I don't know, go to a budget and ops committee meeting and talk about how, well, what you talked about in the committee meeting didn't make it to the full city council. So when the agenda reflects weeks later, it's you passed that multi-$100 million bond deal. There was actually a procedure you had to go through in order to make sure that bond deal was appropriately secured. And if you don't go through the procedure to make sure that bond deal is appropriately secured, what does it do to us when you put the obligation on us? And what do you think we're going to let you think you're allowed to do to our children when you use our children and their education as your collateral? Oh my God. You mean that is not what they teach you? That is not what they understand that they're working with when a woman comes into a domestic violence shelter and you ask her to participate in a focus group regarding what your needs are? Well, let me tell you something. One of the funders in your network did, and she didn't stop. And if you hadn't been actively engaged in undermining your own government, she'd be your attorney general right now. And she would understand that every 15 minutes she devotes to you and your needs is worth at least a baseline income of $4,500. And it's provable and it's verifiable. And it's not necessarily a performance standard everybody needs to commit to. But it's one that you need to understand in terms of why that kind of value would be justified. And it's different than saying, well, thank you so much for all that you contributed, but we needed a job and we needed our job secured. And, we were able to take what you were going to do with the women that were supposed to be what we performed our job for, and we're going to get it for ourselves. And we actually, are never going to talk to the Attorney General. You're not going to respond to a subpoena for records. You're not going to provide me with direct contact with your legal counsel. And you're also not going to provide me with affidavits of your understanding of events wherein it was witnessed that you were involved in highly illegal activities up to and including trafficking, up to and including illegal contract bidding, up to and including drug smuggling. That's just the start, right? And I don't like being so severe, but this is the only thing that kept me alive. And I know that it was absolutely 100% intended that none of those women were allowed to stay inside that shelter if they talk like this, right? Which brings up the question, how many women that went through the bridge over troubled waters in 2017, the entire year reflected in that audit, how many of those women and their children are still alive now? How many of those women and those children died of COVID-19? How many of those women and their children got COVID-19? You're going to have to answer that question one way or another, and then you're going to have to go to every other shelter that was mentioned in that writ of habeas corpus. How many of us did you murder for your employee benefits? See, you could have incorporated too. You could have incorporated too. And later on, after we had actually been able to get our housing and we had started doing what we wanted to do, you could have engaged with us in any number of other manners. It could have actually provided you with what you needed. Do you know how many times I went to a domestic violence shelter and some woman in the shelter would say, I want to do something like this? How many of us were murdered? It's a very serious question. That's what I'm waking up with today. Somebody took all of the videos I made, and I don't even really know what they did because they wouldn't disclose. Did they want to try to characterize it as part of the energy transition? I apologize. There were laws that had to be adhered to. right? Did somebody want to consider it in terms of consolidation of assets in order to do what they did in 2008, which was allow for financial services and banking firms that had engaged in completely irresponsible and highly illegal activities to strong arm and extort the people of the United States into allowing for our assets to be liquidated so that they could be put into circulation for those firms that bail themselves out? Are we all in a situation now where they've forced collectivized us so that the gas and oil sector, which already intentionally, willingly, and knowingly engaged in a process of taking out hundreds of billions of dollars of what was alleged to be short term loans in order to deal with a variety of matters related ostensibly to their operations, and now, because of the COVID-19 crisis, they're supposed to be able to draw on us as part of the considerations of intangible drilling cost that they're able to get subsidies from the government for? Yeah, see, all of that's illegal. All of that's illegal. And if you don't prosecute it as crime, then you bankrupt your own treasury. And I'm not going to let that happen. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go through every video I made last year, as I've been saying, and I'm going to keep a time labor, right? Because I contend I've actually met all of the benchmarks that I set up. And if you may not like my attitude, and you may not like my presentation, maybe you did, and you were really hoping to get that again. But the point of the matter is, qualitative is not about branding or marketing. Branding and marketing go so far. There are some places and some ways of being that much prefer this kind of marketing, right? And for what we need, this is actually the way it has to be approached. And so I'm going to go through and I'm going to see what the time labor value would be at the rate I would charge now. And then understand, think for myself. What if I was doing what I said I was doing? What if by this time, last year, those gas and oil facilities in Texas had been shut down, pending an appropriate prosecution for the abuses of power of certain people that had already been named and identified? What if it had done what I said it was going to do and had budgeted in my own manner, based upon laws that exist here in the state of Texas regarding storage and demurrage? And within 90 days, we had mounted that case and we had prosecuted them. That means all that stuff that happened during the summer when they transferred all of our assets and they swapped out a bunch of things between us and Asia wouldn't have happened. And if it was meant to happen, it wouldn't have happened like that. And so by the time the 1 year comes around this year, we're not in the situation we're in. And if that magistrate judge had tried to issue that hit on me, or it tried to compound what the Supreme Court did last year that got manipulated by those magistrate judges, well, I believe that they would have very significantly reconsidered the best interest it served them in all of the other contexts within which they were considering. And they just wouldn't have done it. And then you could have said, wow, we prevented a great crime because we attended to our duties to prosecute the crime that existed at the time. Right? So I'm going to do that accounting right now. I'm going to see how much did not get paid for, just in that regard. That's not including all of the stuff that I do offline. I put this on the record for a reason. I'm going to see what it says right now as of today.